Whether it be on a magical school bus, a crazy cat bus, or just a totally ordinary bus, it can be said that buses play a pivotal role in our modern society. And while buses are a mode of transportation that bring us from one location to another, in this video, I will attempt to also explain how buses play a much bigger role than that. I will be explaining the effects of buses on society, how people feel about buses, and the overall significance of buses in the future. From its inception in 1926 to 1976, Singapore's bus system was synonymous with being old, slow, and unreliable, and commuters would complain that they were either being fried in the sun or soaked in the rain, as they battled to open and close windows that just would not budge. And the perception of buses in Singapore would stay largely negative until 1974, when a team of senior civil servants stepped up to overhaul the transport network and its management. And in 4 quick years, they transformed the bus service to the clean and reliable mode of transport for the modern era. So we've established what buses are, and their history in Singapore. But what about buses as a stage of social collisions and interaction? Well, to examine this, I took a ride on Bus 100's route that goes from Ghim Moh Terminal to Serangoon Interchange and observed the space around it. Taking the bus down from Ghim Moh, which is a residential area, to the city centre, towards Geylang, the red light district, and then to the interchange, a common thread emerged. Singapore's roads are lined with an absurd amount of greenery. But what's more interesting is that these trees go invisible to us. We quite literally miss the forest for the trees. By taking deliberate effort to notice the greenery, you realize that trees and greenery are always in your line of sight. And while one could say that being a garden city takes more than just planting trees along the roads, if Singapore has done one thing right, it is planting trees along the roads. And all these trees really do aid in the soothing effect buses have on its passengers, as the green breaks up the monochromatic city into different hues of green and other colors. And this lets our monkey brains get calmed down by the presence of nature, as opposed to the brutal concrete of urbanization. So driving down the downtown cityscape lets you see Singapore's unique city planning. Modern areas like the Central Business District get juxtaposed against the old heritage areas of Chinatown. And this can be seen as perhaps the new imposing itself onto the old, or maybe it is a symphony between these two periods. But riding the bus lets you see Singapore through an unfiltered lens. The whole Singapore, heritage areas like Little India, Geylang District, which are ancient remains of an imagined golden past, the HDBs, condos, and skyscrapers that represent the demanding present, as well as the construction sites that lays out the blueprints of Singapore's future. And so you get this nice slicing of Singapore's past, Singapore's present, and Singapore's future. Sitting on the upper deck of a double-decker bus helps detach us from the tension of these streets, to look at things from a broader perspective, quite literally, and to see all the people milling around rushing to work. And it lets you take a step back from it all, to detach yourself from reality for just a moment, to peer your head above the water long enough for you to see where you are and where you're going. So buses were always seen as a space agnostic of gender to me. Buses are typically an isolated experience, and the main goal of a bus journey was to actually purposely not interact with other people. But whether buses are a gendered space remains debatable today. And so I did a poll on Instagram, and 85% of people voted that buses were not a gendered space. In this comprising of 85% of people, there was a good mix of both female and male participants that voted for the negative. And even from my observations while riding the bus, there appeared to be no blatant discrepant behavior exhibited between the genders. The one strong proponent that buses are a gendered space, however, is the concern over women's safety, specifically regarding outrage or modesty cases. In Singapore, according to the Singapore Police Force, the number of outrage and modesty cases in the public transport system remains an overall concern, with a rise in these crimes since 2021. Speaking with context from the Singapore Police Force, they actually disclosed that a large majority of these outrage and modesty cases occurred in bus interchanges and MRT stations, but less so on buses. And one reason that they gave was because of the existence of escalators in these spaces. With escalators, they've helped enable these crimes to happen. Ultimately, while buses being a gendered space is up for debate in Singapore, perhaps it is because these buses are not seen as gendered. That is why so many people have come to love them in Singapore. They find independence and acceptance on the bus, regardless of who they are, what background they come from, whether they had a good day or a bad day. The bus accepts them all the same. Has there ever been like a time where like your race or your gender you've had like experiences with that on the bus? Like specifically? Or
Not that I can recall.
Okay.
But there was this one time in Japan where I was sitting exactly like this with one of my legs out in the aisle, and an old Japanese man came up to and yelled at me. I didn't know what it was about, but I think it was because I wasn't being polite in the way that they recognized.
okay.
So
The general response is that people do not think there is much racial discrimination on buses. One Redditor commented, "There are news about racist people on board, but really quite uncommon. I have yet to encounter any." Another Redditor gave their personal insight on the issue. "It should be noted that people do not sit next to Bangladeshis because they are manual workers and are covered in sweat after a hard day's work. Those who are clean do not want to dirty themselves and do not sit beside them. In other words, Singaporeans do not sit with Bangladeshis because they are similar to Indians, but because they do labour." And while there is truth to what this person has said, I do believe this form of thinking can lead to an association between dark-skinned individuals as synonymous with being smelly and dirty, which is highly problematic and resulting in the discrimination of an entire racial group and divisions between communities. Imagine communities on the bus, where despite being so small and temporal, we never know most of its fellow members, and yet for a brief period in time, we all share a moment together.
And I just ran onto the bus, and then when I was on the bus, I realized that I wasn't wearing a mask, and it was quite a crowded bus as well. So I panicked for a split second, but then I turned to a teenager and said, "Hey, do you mind if I ask if I could get a mask from you?" And then she very kindly searched through her bag and got me a mask, which was a very nice mask with colors on it, beautiful colors, and gave it to me. And when I offered to pay for it, she refused, and so I was just very thankful to her for just helping me out when I was in the spot.
So in this person's testimony, he felt a lot of warmth from that exchange between him and the other passenger, and helped internalize this idea of an imagined community within the space of a bus. So although we may not know them, we may never see them again, there is a sense of attachment to the people on the bus that perhaps if you are placed in a pinch, they will try their best to come to your aid. In many ways, buses are a blank canvas of possibility. We can get on it, ride on for a bit, and then get off. But we can also get on it, daydream, get hit with random sparks of creativity, and get off with an original concept for a novel we wish to write someday. Buses allow you to breathe, because there's simply no expectation of being productive on a bus. No expectation at all. Anything you do on a bus is icing on the cake, and that frees us up to do things we wouldn't normally do, like being still. And so there's a certain poetic irony in the space associated with movement and travelling that is also the space for us to be still. But perhaps it is also this very movement that is what lulls us into this state of calmness. And within our moments on a bus are dozens of other moments. Once our mind is cradled into this relaxed state, it fractures. One shot of it might focus on the surroundings, ensuring we get off at the right stop. Another shot hones in on the music or podcast that we have on. And another fragment remembers a memory. And then another thinks up a fantastic idea of dreams that they have. And so buses provide the blank canvas of opportunity for us to imprint our marks on. And that is truly bussing.